Most hunters in the US grew up hunting from a very young age. But what if that's not you? What if you don't look like the stereotypical USian hunter? If you're curious about hunting, how do you even get started? Where do you go? Who do you talk to? What do you need to know? As someone who didn't get started hunting until I was 30, I can tell you that the prospects of becoming a hunter can be really daunting. So in today's episode, I want to talk about 3 essential questions that every adult onset hunter should be asking themselves as they set out on this journey. Let's go. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jonathan. I'm a wildlife ecology professor showing you how to build the wild kitchen. So you're thinking about becoming a hunter. Awesome. Great thing to be involved in. But maybe you're struggling with where to start, who to talk to, what questions are relevant, what equipment you'll need, where you can go, all sorts of things. Don't worry. I've been where you are right now, and I have some thoughts about how you might want to go about this process. So this episode is about the who, the why, and the what. And by the end, you'll have a solid foundation to turn your aspirations for becoming a hunter into a reality that is sustainable and put you in good relations with the relatives that you're hunting. And if you happen to be a Black adult onset hunter, this episode is really for you. So I guess one of the first places to start is, why should you even be listening to me? So as I mentioned, I'm an adult onset hunter. I got started hunting at the age of 30. I'm now 41 years old and have been hunting for about a decade. I've hunted deer, small game like rabbits, squirrels, groundhogs. I also happen to be a Black person, as you might have guessed, and have written a lot about what it's like to be a Black adult onset hunter. All right, let's get to the first question you should be asking yourself as an adult onset hunter. And so the first question is, why do you want to hunt? Now, you may already know the answer, but one of the things that I think is helpful is for you to articulate this answer either in writing or out loud to yourself or someone else so they can hear what it is that draws you to this practice. Are you hunting for subsistence, self-sufficiency? Are you hunting to build skills and competency in the outdoors? Are you hunting to establish a greater connection with the non-human built environment? There's no strict right or wrong answer, but it's a good idea to figure out what is motivating you to be in this space. And also realize that that motivation may change from year to year, from season to season, or from hunt to hunt. But it's important to know that your why for hunting is going to determine a lot about what happens next in your journey. So take some time to specifically articulate your why. Hey folks, I just wanted to take a break and let you know that one of the best ways to get the most out of the content on this channel is to subscribe to my newsletter. Every Sunday, I give you more depth and insight into the topics I cover on Out There JCH, including thoughts and perspectives that I don't really share on this platform. The newsletter is free to sign up, and as an incentive to becoming a subscriber, I'm offering a free wild food resource guide that will help make you a more capable harvester and home cook. Just click the link in the description to sign up. Okay, let's get back to the episode. For me, it's a combination of many of the things that I mentioned before. I hunt to eat. I don't hunt for sport. I hunt so I can put food on the table because it gives me a greater sense of health for me and my family, and it also helps me build skills and to connect to the non-human environment. So feel free to write your why in the comments section. I'd love to hear what you all think about this. All right, the second question that I think every adult onset hunter should ask themselves after you've determined your why is to determine your who. Now, the who of your hunting journey is going to be multifaceted. The first who is going to be, who will you hunt? Now, it may sound strange for me to use the word who instead of the word what, but this goes to the core of my hunting philosophy and recognizing the personhood of all of the organisms that we interact with. We tend to reserve the who for specific human beings, but I think it's important if you're going to be someone who's hunting to build better relations with the natural environment, to begin to shift your thinking from ways that we're socialized to think of other animals that we interact with. We tend to think of non-human animals as whats or its or things rather than a who. And I think that's much to our detriment in the way that this society treats non-human animals. This is something that many indigenous cultures around the world criticize what I've come to call anti-indigenous civilizations on. This idea of othering non-human relatives, which allows us to do all sorts of horrible things to them. As someone who's beginning their hunting journey after they become an adult, you're going to have to rely heavily on mentors. And it's also important to find as many different mentors as you possibly can. Just like teachers that you've had throughout your life, some were really good at teaching particular things, and they had weaknesses where they weren't able to communicate information that you might need to know in a way that resonated with you. And the only way around making sure that you get the best education and mentorship in hunting you can is to have multiple teachers and not just one who you solely rely on. The who you're going to be hunting with is also really important because you are out there in the woods with tools that are designed to kill. So no matter what racial identity you have or other identity you have, it's really important to be aware of how your identities are going to be legible in the popular hunting space in the United States of America. If you're a bearded white guy who loves flannel, that identity is going to be much more legible, much more expected, and more readily accepted than if you're, let's say, a trans black woman. One who wants to hunt should be allowed to do so safely with a reasonable expectation that they're going to have a good time and that they're going to be able to come home at the end of the day. And in the United States of America, depending on your identities, there are different expectation levels of safety. So as an adult onset hunter, be thinking about that. Who are the people that you are going to be out hunting with? What is the space you're going to occupy? And how are you going to stay safe? Not just use of firearms or archery equipment, but in terms of your physical and psychological space. Okay, so the last who you should consider, who are you going to mentor? Hunting participation in the United States of America is in decline and has been for several decades. And this is sad because one of the ways that a lot of conservation gets funded in this country is through hunter participation. And so as someone who's thinking about or who has begun their journey as an adult onset hunter, it's really important that if you enjoy this activity, you're reaching out to other people who are maybe just a few steps behind you in their journey, or who are in lockstep with you, that you can offer some help, some resources that are going to make their journey just a little bit better and more enjoyable. Who will you teach? Okay, the last question that I think every adult onset hunter should be thinking about is the what. And this is probably the thing that got you to click on this video in the first place, is what equipment do I need? What do I need to buy? And I love thumbing through the Cabela's catalog and looking at all the different things that you could buy. But my advice for starting out in terms of the what involve 3 categories of things that are absolutely essential no matter what type of hunting you're doing. And that is the shoes you're going to wear, the harvest tool you're going to use, and how are you going to process and store the animal relatives whose lives you're taking. Now, the most important equipment that any hunter can have, besides the tool that they use to harvest the animal, are the shoes. One of my favorite things that Steven Rinella, founder of Meat Eater, has ever said is he's seen more hunting trips ruined by bad footwear than anything else. And I think that's one of the best pieces of advice that any hunter can have. Make sure that you're right with your shoes, because if your shoes are failing you, you can't stay out in the field to harvest anything. Now, there are 2 sets of companies that I rely on absolutely heavily. There's a couple of brands that I rely on for shoes, and really only one brand of socks that I use. So let's talk about the shoes. Now, a number of years ago, and I wrote about this in my newsletter, I was prompted to try minimalist shoes. And the idea behind minimalist shoes is that human beings are born with perfect feet. They function the way that they're supposed to. Their physiology is laid out in the exact way that we have needed to move through our environment for hundreds of thousands of years. Now, what modern footwear has done is to begin to change our foot physiology to match all sorts of things that really have nothing to do with the way that the human body functions. And so a minimalist shoe is going to be very flexible. The sole, it's not going to be this hard bottom sole. It's going to be relatively breathable, and it's going to have a wide toe box so that your toes can spread out in the same way that your hand does to provide maximum balance. Now, adjusting myself to minimalist shoes took a while because for most of my life, I had been wearing shoes that have a narrow toe box, a relatively thick and inflexible sole, and one that even for men's shoes raises your heel just a little bit, which throws off your entire physiology. But once I made that switch, I realized how much I was missing in terms of feeling and sensing my environment, and just how much better my feet and body functioned when I was going through my day-to-day or when I was out in the field. So if you haven't tried minimalist shoes, I strongly encourage you to do so. Now, oftentimes hunters are in environmental conditions that are pretty harsh. It's going to be really cold, and traction is not going to be great. Now, 8 years ago, there weren't a lot of options for minimalist hiking shoes. But fortunately, now there are many different options from several different shoe companies that make really rugged but also very flexible boots that you can use for hunting. Now, the brand I keep coming back to again and again are Lem. They have lots of different shoes for many different occasions: casual, cross-training, running, and also rugged outdoor hiking and things like that. Another brand that has a good variety of shoes and a good track record are Zero shoes. I found that Zero shoes don't last as long as my Lems do, but they're still a brand that I've come to use and rely on over the years. Okay, I don't have any recommendations for more traditional hiking boots. I haven't found a need to go back to those boots, even when the weather gets really challenging. So if someone wants to say that minimalist shoes are fine, but they're actually not good in the snow, I can tell you that my Lems boots in 12 inches of snow for hours and didn't feel any difference in terms of warmth or support or stability than I did in my other shoes. And in fact, the minimalist boots were quite a bit warmer because with that more flexible sole, I was able to keep my foot warmer because it was actually moving inside that shoe rather than being encased in a cast and just sort of being idle and hoping that the cold doesn't get in. So I highly recommend minimalist shoes over the other brands, but give them a try. One thing that's important to note is that if you're going to try minimalist shoes for the first time, make sure you give yourself at least 2 months or a month to wear those shoes so that your body can adjust. If you're going to start wearing minimalist shoes, that means you're probably going to be using a lot more of your foot muscles and lower leg muscles than you've been used to your entire life. You're actually going to be asking your foot to do work, whereas modern footwear, it asks your foot to do a lot less, okay? So don't go out and buy a pair of Lems on Tuesday and then go for your first hunt in 40-degree weather on Saturday and expect you to have a good time. It has nothing to do with the quality of the shoe, but all about getting your body used to this new shoe, which I think and a lot of other people have come to understand as being better for your body. All right, there's only one brand of sock that I use, that I buy, and that is Darn Tough, based out of Vermont. And the reason why I only use Darn Tough is because they have a lifetime warranty. They're also really high quality, incredibly durable, made out of wool, sustainable, and made in the United States. It may seem too good to be true, but I have worn out a couple of pairs of Darn Tough socks. I've simply sent them back and they've given me a store credit for me to buy another pair of those socks. So the idea that, each pair of Darn Tough socks you buy could be the last pair that you ever buy of that particular variety is just incredible to me. Now, a single pair of Darn Tough socks is not going to cost any less than $18, which may seem like a lot for a single pair of socks because you could go to Target or Walmart and get a pack of maybe 6 or 8 socks for like the same price. But of course, those socks are going to be mass produced, probably with questionable labor practices, and may last you the entire season. And then you're going to have to go out and buy another pair of those socks. So you get what you pay for. You buy cheap socks, you're going to get cheap results. You buy Darn Tough socks, and you've got socks for life that are high quality and won't fail you. Now, when the weather gets really cold, I usually darn 2 pairs of Darn Tough medium or heavyweight socks. Pair that with my Lem boots, and my feet are golden the entire time. So you may be asking like, well, what other equipment and clothing and things that do I need to wear? And unless you're going after turkeys, which have very good eyesight, you don't need to go for any fancy camo or any of this stuff. Camouflage is nice, but your clothing should be about what keeps you warm, what keeps you comfortable, and obviously what keeps you relatively concealed in your environment. Hunting large game, you're going to need to wear blaze orange anyway so that you're conspicuous to other hunters that are out there. But try not to get caught up on the specialty camo that you could buy and focus on high quality clothes that are going to keep you warm, keep you relatively quiet, and keep you out in the field longer. Okay, so your harvest tool is going to be the next what that you need to consider. Now, if you remember, it's important for you to figure out who you're going to hunt, which is going to determine the harvest tools that you're going to use. Now, there's lots of different tools that you can use, from firearms to archery equipment. If you're only going to buy one harvesting tool to hunt a variety of different wild game, there's really just one tool that comes to mind, and that is a shotgun. Now, I don't own a shotgun, but you can use a shotgun to hunt anything from large game to small game. So if you only had budget for one harvesting tool, I would say purchase a shotgun. Now, the other harvesting firearm that you can use are rifles, and there are so many videos about the best all-around large game rifle. And as I said at the beginning of the episode, this is not about directing you to a particular caliber or a particular brand, but you want to go back to the who you are hunting in order to determine what rifle you might want to purchase. Now, I personally own a 270 rifle by Ruger. I love it. I use it to hunt white-tailed deer in the eastern part of the United States. I could use this rifle to hunt other large game, although I probably wouldn't use that small of a caliber to hunt really big game like moose or grizzly bear. But if you were in the market for a good all-around rifle to hunt large game, I'd say you probably couldn't go wrong with a 270 rifle. Now, in terms of archery, your options are crossbow, compound bow, and probably none of us who are adult onset hunters are really thinking about different kinds of archery, like a recurve bow. That's a much more advanced piece of harvesting equipment. I own a crossbow, which has some advantages over a compound bow, one of which is that crossbows can shoot their bolts faster, and the learning curve for learning how to operate a crossbow is a lot less than that of learning how to shoot well with a compound bow. But it's really up to you, and again, the who of your hunting practice. Now, the area that I live in Michigan means that I can't use my rifle in the half of the state that I live in because of state regulations. So I switched to a crossbow, which I love. Maybe down the line, I'll think about using a compound bow, which is a slightly different way of hunting. But for now, the crossbow does all of my big game hunting, and I love it. Now, if you're thinking about hunting small game, there is a very popular 22 rifle, much smaller caliber rifle, that are used for a variety of small game. And then, of course, one that's really not talked about much is a blowgun for hunting small game and even hunting big game. Now, if you're curious about how you might use a blowgun for hunting small game, then you can check out this video where I use my blowgun to hunt squirrels in my backyard. The one thing you want to be careful about if you're going to try out a blowgun is, one, is it legal to use in your state? And two, you want to treat it like a firearm. Blowguns are powerful tools for harvesting animals, powerful enough to take a human's life. So make sure that no matter what tool you're using, you buy the necessary equipment to keep it safe and out of the reach of people who might cause themselves harm simply by being curious about it. The last what is your processing and storage. And for processing and storage, there are really three components to this. The knives that you're going to use to skin and break down your harvest, what piece of equipment you're going to use to package the parts of the animal that you've broken down, and then where you're going to store those parts of the animal after they've been packaged. Now, I have a variety of videos that can guide you through my recommendations for these three components: a good chef's knife, a good hunting knife, my vacuum sealer recommendation, and a freezer. Now, I don't have a particular freezer to recommend, but you can read the reviews on which brands are better than others. I found that there's not a whole lot of difference between the brands over the 3 or 4 freezers that I've owned. I will recommend that you have a chest freezer, one that opens up like a luggage chest, rather than a stand-up freezer. And for the simple reason is it's a lot easier to keep everything at the same cold temperature with a chest freezer as opposed to a stand-up freezer. And if you're going to buy a freezer that's maybe one size larger than you might think you need. Because if you get into hunting, as I have, you'll know that it's probably not enough. And in terms of knives, you can check out this video where I talk about the different knives that you use, but Victorinox is a fantastic brand that is very affordable, makes stainless steel knives that stay sharp and do the job well. And if you're looking for a comprehensive guide on this equipment, then you can check out my wild food guide on outtherejch.com. Okay, so those are the 3 questions that I think that every adult onset hunter should be asking themselves as they begin their hunting journey. Learning to hunt is so worth it. It has given me such a level of satisfaction, a feeling of good relations, and self-confidence that I didn't realize I was missing. In terms of the things that you can buy, a general rule when contemplating purchases that are going to enhance your hunting experience is to make sure that you know exactly why you're buying what you're buying. Don't buy the new camo pattern simply because it's a new camo pattern. Understand why you might need that particular camo pattern, how it's going to be useful, how many times you're going to use it, and then make the decision about whether or not that is something that you want to spend your hard-earned money on. Should you spend the extra $200 on a Damascus steel hunting knife or Damascus steel chef knife? Or should you go with the stainless steel version that's a lot cheaper? And if the why is because it looks gorgeous and I can afford it, awesome. Go for it. But if you don't really understand the differences between stainless steel and Damascus steel or carbon steel, and why you might want to use one versus the other, then maybe it's a good idea to do that little bit of research to find out so that you can justify your purchase. But as I mentioned before, there are some essential purchases that you'll need that are relatively inexpensive, that are going to do more for enhancing your hunting experience than most of the things that you can buy to go out and harvest relatives. And maybe the most important thing to consider that I haven't mentioned before is the fact that hunting involves taking a life. And that's something that none of us should be taking lightly. In my book, taking a life is about establishing a relationship of reciprocity. You are ending the life of a being that would very much rather still go on living than be in your freezer. And so what are you going to do with that life that is taken? How are you going to justify that life being taken? And how are you going to use the body of that individual so that their life is honored? How are you going to be responsible for those of that relative's community that still remain, that are very likely going to miss the relative that now sits in your freezer? And so we can get caught up on all sorts of details and technical aspects of hunting, but I wanted to make sure that this episode was about really engaging the philosophical reasons, the spiritual reasons behind hunting. It's always a good idea to unpack those ideas, to look at them and examine them before you decide that hunting is something that you want to do. Please drop a comment below if you have anything to share or add about your adult onset hunting journey, or any questions that you might have. I'd be happy to answer and follow up. If you're a person of color who's beginning their hunting journey as an adult, I cannot recommend enough the Hunters of Color community. Hunters of Color is a nonprofit organization designed to make hunting more accessible for people who are generally not expected in these spaces. And I've come to connect with many people in this network and rely on this network for learning and support. Okay, thanks for tuning in. That's all I have, and I'll see you next time on